Hello and welcome to the Smart Divorce podcast. I am, as usual in this series, joined by an esteemed panel of guests who I'm very delighted are going to be joining me for some chat today about resolution and also about where you can find the right professional for you, for your needs and for what you're hoping your divorce will look like. I'm going to ask my panel to introduce themselves. So to begin with, Katie, how are you doing? Thank you for joining me.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. I'm Katie Harding. I'm a family law solicitor in the family law team at Pennington's Manchester Cooper, based in London. I'm also a member of Resolution, and I'm looking forward to today's discussion to inform the listeners about what resolution is and how it can be helpful to them as clients, and also to assist them in what to look for when they're trying to find a solicitor.
Perfect. Thank you. And Sushma, welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Good morning. Thank you for having me again. So I guess like Katie, my history is as a lawyer, but I gave the legal hat up over lockdown. I'm a dual qualified mediator and I have been since 2010. And it's an accredited mediation that I offer for all issues, children and finances. Set my own family mediation practice up. It's an online service called Holistic Family Mediation during lockdown. And I'm also looking forward to today's conversation because I think it'd be great for our listeners to find out a bit more about where they can find, the professionals that they need to serve them, their team, to get through the difficult and tough, challenging times.
Perfect. Thank you, Sushma. And last but by no means least is wonderful Sue Palmer-Conn. Hi, Sue. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, yes, thank you. I'm Sue Palmer-Conn, aka the Divorce Doctor. I'm a professional divorce coach and I also train professional divorce coaches.
Fantastic. Short but sweet. We're going to find out much more about Sue's divorce coach training business, I'm sure, later on. So to start today's episode off, I'm going to pass over to Katie to tell us a bit about what resolution is.
So when I was getting ready for this podcast yesterday, I thought I'd have a little look on the Resolution website just to see how they describe themselves rather than just my interpretation. And I'll tell you what that is. So Resolution describes themselves as a community of family justice professionals who work with families and individuals to resolve issues in a constructive way. And I think that sums it up really nicely. I think there are two important bits, I think, in that description. First is the use of the word family justice professionals rather than just family lawyers, because people who work in the family law or divorce world can become members of Resolution. It isn't just for lawyers. I think the other important bit in that description is about working in a constructive way. And that's really, really important as a family lawyer, and I'm sure other family professionals too. Resolution has a code of practice that when you become a member, you sign up to abide by that code of practice to work in a specific ways with clients, with litigants in person on the other side, and with the solicitors on the other side of a case as well. You have training on that code of practice when you start, so you're fully informed about how you should be working, and it encourages family justice professionals to work together in a non-confrontational way to try and resolve issues that parties are going through when they're separating. And that might be thinking about the language that they use in correspondence so that it's not an inflammatory language, or thinking about how they can best support their clients or their families to ensure that the needs of the children are put first, for example. So these are all things, when you sign up to become a member of Resolution, you agree that you're going to do. I think one of the really great things about Resolution is that if you and the lawyer on the other side are both members of Resolution, which I would say in my experience, the majority of family lawyers are signed up to the Resolution code of practice, it sets things off on the right foot. I think clients come to us at a time, usually when things are at their worst and probably things are very heated between them. And I think by signing up to the code of practice, one of the things we're committing to is trying to take the heat out of that situation and bring things back to a calmer level to start having some sensible and practical discussions. And I suppose one thing I should say is, yes, it's non-confrontational and constructive, but that doesn't mean that your lawyer's just going to kind of roll over and agree to everything the other person wants. They'll still take a robust approach, and they'll still be acting in your best interests and your children's best interests, but they're going to do it in a more constructive and efficient manner.
That's brilliant roundup. And I'll go home now.
You said it all for us, Katie.
Call it a day.
Sushma, mediation is really important in this process of non-confrontational. Obviously, you're a member of Resolution as a mediator, and you've continued that despite no longer being a family lawyer. Tell me a bit about what Resolution means to you and why you're a member.
Yeah, I guess for me it's the community spirit, right? So not only was I a member when I was a lawyer, and now I continue to be a member, but it's because I see the value and the benefits of working with like-minded professionals who are coming from, I guess the same objective for the clients that we're serving. Most of us who are Resolution members, whichever background and profession we're from, we're actually coming, I would say, from a heart-centered perspective, usually from the child-centered perspective with our children. And I think that's key here, because we're really trying to support families in the best way we can, and always reminding them of the bigger picture. What's the impact on your children, if there are children, I guess. And so for me, it's keeping that community spirit and working in a joint manner as we're all trying to do, and making sure that our client has the key, professional around them. And quite often we're as mediators, signposting. I know what my role is, I know what my lane is, and I know what I can and cannot do in terms of my level of experience and qualifications. So yeah, I absolutely see the benefits. I've been a member since I qualified, to be completely honest, and for all the reasons that Katie's just outlined. It's really important to always educate and remind clients that, if they haven't got a lawyer engaged, I'm always waving the flag. Make sure you try and engage a lawyer that's a Resolution member, because of the fact that we've signed up to this code of practice and conduct that we're all very proud of. It comes from a place of keeping, as you said, that temperament down. Of course, none of us roll over, and as mediator, of course, I'm not taking anybody's side, and I'm always encouraging legal advice or financial support or coaching. But at the end of the day, it's just to try and manage their emotions as well as the legal side, I guess, from my point of view.
Yeah, absolutely. And so divorce coaching is, I guess, one of the more recent developments in the family justice professionals. What brought you to Resolution, and why is it important for you to be a member?
I think the main reason that I joined was to be seen as a professional in the field. Yeah. I've worked really hard and I've got numerous coaching qualifications, becoming more and more specialised. And once I gained the full qualification for professional divorce coaching, I wanted to ensure that my clients were working, knew that they were working with somebody who was qualified and experienced within that field. And I think, unfortunately, there are a lot of people calling themselves divorce coaches, but really they are life coaches who just happen to work with people who are coming out of divorce. Unless they've been through specialist training, they don't really understand, apart from their own experience, they don't really understand all the nuances of the psychology, the emotions, the potential conflict areas of divorce. And I would always encourage people to look for somebody who has got that full professional qualification and experience behind them. And that, I think, it also allows you then to know that you're working with people with working in the same sort of like-minded way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with what you've said there about divorce coaches. Now, I've met a few people over my time of working in this field where they've said they're a divorce coach, and then they'll do a few months saying they're a divorce coach, and then suddenly they'll be a dating coach, and then a few months later they'll be a marketing coach.
Like changing outfits.
A bit like that, yeah. And I wonder if it's because they realise actually it's quite hard working with people going through divorce. It's a very emotional period of time for people, and it's not an easy role. What I'm interested in, Sue, is how our listeners go about finding a divorce coach who's genuinely a divorce coach, who is experienced in this field and who's got the right qualifications. What qualifications are we looking for? What things should we be aware of when we're looking at divorce coaches?
Currently in the UK, the Divorce Coaching Academy is the only one that is externally accredited, and that to me is one of the important things, that the quality of coaching is recognised by an awarding body. There is a program over in the States, the Certified Divorce Coaching program, which is externally accredited as well. So I would look to see, A, if they are calling themselves a professional divorce coach, and B, or have they done an accredited program?
Okay. And are there programs that make them look as though they've got qualifications that aren't accredited? How do we find out that? I guess it's because this is an important thing, isn't it? It's really important that you find the right professional who's properly experienced and properly qualified in this area, especially when you're going through such an emotional period of time. You want to be supported by people who are suitably qualified and accredited.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there are a couple of courses, mainly online courses that train people just using videos or written material. There's no coaching observation or mentoring or supervision, and they tend to call themselves divorce and breakup coaches.
Okay.
So look for people that, most coaches offer a free half-hour consultation. Talk to them before you engage them. Ask them the right questions. What qualifications have you got? What experience have you got? And even how long is it since your own divorce? Because if you're working with somebody who has only recently gone through a divorce, then they're going to be working from sympathy, not empathy. They'll be triggered by their own experiences, will be triggered. And that's one thing at the academy. We won't allow anybody to train that has only recently gone through their own divorce. They've got to be well and truly through it, so that they can come from a place of empathy, not just sympathy.
That's good advice. And I would imagine that divorce coaches who are serious about their profession would also be members of Resolution as well. And then they're observing the code of practice that Katie so eloquently told us about earlier.
Yeah, unfortunately, they at the moment they can only be associate members. They can't be full members.
Yeah.
But as you know, we are working to get a Resolution accreditation, so that people then can be completely assured that they are fully qualified.
Absolutely, and that would be a fantastic step as well. Sushma, mediation, I always mediation is not just about divorce, is it? And so Googling mediator is not necessarily going to give you somebody who's experienced in this field.
Yeah, mediation is across the board and various other sectors as well, absolutely. So yeah, if our listeners are looking for a mediator, and of course qualify it, we're looking for a family mediator. You're not looking for a civil mediator or commercial mediator, number one. And number two, of course, there is a body that all qualified mediators should be signing up with to be recognised. So that's the Family Mediation Council. So at the outset of this podcast, you mentioned that that's something that's going to be important to clients. So I've just Googled the same as Katie has, that the Family Mediation Council, and it's very user friendly. At the bottom of the right hand corner, you've got find your local mediator. And so if our listeners want to make sure that they've got somebody who's qualified and accredited for their needs, and you have accredited mediators, some are accredited just for family, just for children, issues, some just for finances, and some like myself, I'm, offering all issues. And so it's important for the clients to actually make sure they're matched with the right qualified mediator, the right accreditation. That's a gold badge of honour. So when you're accredited, you know that you've got somebody who's experienced, who's actually literally walked on coal to get that accreditation. I have to say it's a really, really hard process to get that gold badge of honour. But for clients, it's great for them to know, because if they know they've got an accredited mediator, they know they've had the experience, the qualification. And as I said, the simplest way of finding somebody local, and through one body which covers all, professional family mediators, is the Family Mediation Council. Of course, many of our clients are going to do the usual Google search locally, and they will also pop up with lots of mediators. But then, cross-check it, I'd say, and check on the Family Mediation Council. And as Sue's just said, what's really important is don't just go for the first one that's, probably paid for ad. Speak to 2 or 3. We all offer free, initial telephone consultations. Do you resonate with them? Can you trust them? You're bearing your heart and soul at the most difficult time, and trust is so important. And so that's the kind of guidance I'd give to the listeners is always sort of be sure that you can trust in the person that you're going to hire in terms of, taking your case from where you are to where you want to be.
I think the same is probably true for trying to find a solicitor, Sushma. I think, I mean, we call it a beauty parade when, clients tend to go see 3, 4, 5 different solicitors to see who is a good fit for them. Mm-hmm. And I actually think that's really important, and it's not something that we mind that people do. In fact, it's got to be a relationship that works both ways, and there has to be trust, and you have to feel that that person is going to do their best for you, and that they get you. I think it's really important. Talking about trying to find people who are properly qualified, there's lots of different ways that you can find a good solicitor. I think you can look on the Resolution website for starters. That will show you solicitors, and I think you can search by area on there, and it will have people that are all signed up to Resolution on there. I think you can search on the Solicitors Regulation Authority website as well for qualified solicitors, and you want to make sure that any solicitor you do instruct has an SRA number, a Solicitors Regulation Authority number, so that they're properly qualified. That's really important. I can't imagine that many don't, but just in case. And Google searches are helpful, as is speaking to perhaps friend or family that have been through a similar situation, although I say that with a bit of caution, because just because that solicitor was the right person for them doesn't necessarily mean they're the right person for you. But if you need a starting point, that's not a terrible place to head off from, I'd say.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to ask you something, then it's gone out of my head. What I am going to do is ask Sushma about couples, because when a client is talking to me or to Katie or to Sue, they're often, it's just one of them.
Yeah.
In mediation, it's always 2 who have to agree on the mediator. How, because I know, you get on as an individual with different people, don't you? How do you find the right mediator for both parties?
Yeah, and Tamsin, that's an interesting question, because the difficulty is when clients are split, they're not in a good place to start thinking about working together. Some are, and some will actually do the search together, and that's brilliant. And in fact, if they have a free discovery call with me, because as Sue says, most of us will offer some initial free sort of consultation, I will always encourage, I'll say, have you spoken to your ex that you're looking for a mediator? Because if you are on the talking terms and you've got that capacity to do that, share the website, whether it's me or another person's website, and be on the same page, because then you're coming having chosen the mediator together. Most of the time it doesn't happen that way. So quite often one will be not, one will already make the referral and already booked in for the assessment meeting, and then of course I'm then gently sending communication to the party to invite them to say we've had a referral in. I'm obviously giving the benefits of mediation, explain that it's going to be obviously cost-effective way, and an opportunity to reach their own decision, stay in control. But they sometimes feel like their nose is out of joint. They're like, well, why have they chosen you, and why don't we have a choice? And then I have to sort of calm them down, because when they're on the phone to me, because they have the opportunity then to book a free discovery call, and I'll explain, well, yes, in an ideal world, it'd be great if you could, but of course you've just had this tragic breakup, and they don't take it as I guess an attack or them trying to get one up on you, because it doesn't matter who's made the referral, who's actually brought the case into a mediation session. We're third party neutrals. Just because one referral doesn't mean I'm going to give them more credit or take their side. So it's, again, I guess, the reassurance that I'm going to remain third party neutral. That is my role. And then most of the time there is no issue. With lawyer referrals, thankfully, my understanding is, and I think Katie will then speak to this, is that they will, from my experience, and certainly when I used to practice as a lawyer, we'd kind of propose 3 mediators, or with 5 or whatever, and then give the opportunity to the parties then to consider which one that they would like to then approach. So the parties will research the 3 to 5 mediators. And then when the referral comes through, usually it's on the basis that because they've got lawyers engaged, they've actually reached that joint decision. I don't know, Katie, if
that's exactly what we do. We usually suggest between 3 and 5.
Yeah.
And we'll write to the other side and say, we'd like to go to mediation. Here are some options.
Yeah.
And then they can make their own inquiries and see who might be a good fit. I also think when you're the person on the receiving end of the invitation to mediation, it probably feels like it puts, I don't want to say power, but it puts a bit more control back in your hand, rather than just being dictated to, that this is who you've got to go and see.
Yeah.
It takes that element away as well. And also what we tend to do is try and put forward mediators who offer sort of slightly different things in some ways, slightly different personalities, or have a different approaches to how they work with their clients, because again, that gives the other person a few more options and a bit more feeling of agency in that decision.
Yeah, and can I just add one more thing in terms of mediation? Of course, you've got a wide array of mediation services, different models, right? And so it's very important for our listeners to understand, and that's part of their research when they're deciding on which mediator to go for. What kind of mediation service do they want? So, for example, mine's is a traditional model. Mine's is, I say traditional model, it's an online, so it's not face-to-face. Mine's is an online service, and that's all I offer. I don't offer in person. The traditional model meaning that they're sharing the virtual space together. I don't offer shuttle mediation. I don't offer the new mediation where you can work with lawyers. That name escapes me. Katie, what's the new model where?
Hybrid?
Hybrid. That's it.
Hybrid.
Yeah, and so there are some mediators, of course, who've got other additional strings to their bow. And so if that's what they're looking for, the lawyers actually know this is going to be very contentious, high conflict, big assets. Hybrid is probably the way to work, right? If there's a huge power imbalance. So I guess our listeners need to also be attuned into, what's going to serve them. Middle England, those that actually are trying to save costs and don't have the financial capacity to have hybrid mediation, will be looking to reduce their costs, and that's why it's great to have the lawyers in the background and then work with the mediator. But if they're looking for shuttle because they've got various issues, whether it's domestic abuse or a different kind of power imbalance, and they can't share space, then they want to go to somebody who actually offers that. So I think that's important to know.
Yeah, I think resolution is probably a good place as well for finding information out about all those different options, and how to, it's got useful resources on there, not just for lawyers, because it has lots of things for us, like good practice guides and templates and precedents and things like that. But from the client's perspective, it has lots of information about the law in general, what your rights are, broadly speaking. And I'm pretty sure, and I can't say this with 100% certainty, but I'm pretty sure there's information on there about different sorts of mediation and things like that. So from the client's point of view, resolution website is a really good, also a very good starting point when you're thinking about separating and where you stand and how you might like to deal with things.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's just struck me that I said that Sushma would be in a different position because she works with couples. Do you work with couples, or is the majority of your work just with one person?
I work with couples as a discernment counsellor. So it's the bridge between marriage guidance and going down the divorce route. When couples are at that point where should we make up or break up, normally there's one person that's leaning out and one person that's leaning in. You know, one person wants to end the relationship and the other one wants to save it. And if the leaning in partner persuades the other one to go for marriage guidance, then they're heading for failure because they're not fully engaged. The same with divorce. The leaning out partner will persuade the other one that, you know, the marriage is over and they've got to go down the divorce route. If they take that bridging and talk together so that they are making an informed decision one way or the other, you know, they in discernment, we get them to look at the problems that have arisen that have made them talk about divorce, and to also get them to look at their own part in that problem. So helping them to see their role. And then at the end of the discernment, they get to a point where they're making really strong commitments to either 6 months of marriage guidance with divorce off the table, or to go down the divorce route, but divorce with dignity. And so I always encourage them, especially since the no-fault divorce, to look at filing together, going through mediation rather than jumping straight into litigation, but see if they can sort it out themselves and then engage preferably a neutral solicitor, you know, the new one couple, one solicitor route. And in that way, they're working in a much more collaborative manner, and the children benefit hugely from it.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
The majority of my clients now are coming for discernment rather than coaching.
That's interesting. But is that because there is not very many discernment counsellors in the UK?
At the moment, I'm the only one, but I get
You'd
referrals.
be quite busy then.
Yeah. I'm getting an awful lot of referrals from Europe at the moment. But I'm running a discernment coaching, not counselling, because it would take me years to teach the counselling skills. But I'm running a discernment coaching course in April and May. So hopefully there'll be a few more of us so I can refer on.
Excellent. And Katie, we've mentioned, well, Sue's mentioned about the one solicitor, one couple. She's relatively new. There's also collaborative law. So there are a range of options available in terms of solicitors. How do we go about working out what's best for us as a couple, and where do we find the solicitors who offer these services?
Yeah, I think it's obviously very specific to each individual couple as to what they think the right fit is. I mean, we don't offer the one solicitor per couple advice at the moment. I don't know if we will, but there are pros and cons to that, which we could probably have a whole separate podcast on. But
maybe we will.
Yeah, maybe we will. I better do some research. I think if it is a very amicable divorce, if there's good trust and communication between you, that's probably not a terrible option. I think some people go into a divorce with a very fighting attitude, and I want to win attitude. And, you know, there are lawyers around that are perhaps a bit more robust in that respect than others, and are probably a bit more prepared to take that approach, but I'm not always sure how constructive that is. But again, it's down to personal personal preference, I think. And that's why I mentioned earlier sort of having this beauty parade of going to meet some different lawyers, because we can say all these wonderful things about ourselves online, but until you actually meet someone in person and get a feeling from them, you don't really know. It's like online dating. Someone's profile could be brilliant, they tick all the boxes on papers, but actually you meet
very
them,
much like online dating, isn't it?
it's awful, and you can't wait to get out of there after half an hour. But I think you need to do that. You need to shop around. You need to use all the resources that I mentioned earlier, to see who's nearby, who, some, you might want a local lawyer, you might be guided by how much lawyers cost. That might be a big factor in your decision. So city-based firms, London-based firms tend to be more expensive per hour than the regional or local firms, and that might play a big part, and I'm sure it does for a lot of people. There are so many different factors to consider, and I think you need to consider your individual circumstances. Do a spreadsheet of all the things that are important to you, prioritize them, and fill it out and see where you land, maybe, if that works for you. I think there's lots of different ways that you can make the decision. I think if you're going to go down a mediation route, you need to, and I'm sure Sushma can talk about this endlessly, but there has to be a degree of trust still between you, and you still have to be able to collaborate and work together. And that's why mediation is really great for some couples and not so great for others. And it's not a one size fits all approach. And if you have a mediator, I think it's good.
I'm going to
in the background.
Sorry, Kat, you've just struck a chord with me just there.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I will always say to the participants, at the outset when we have the separate assessment meetings, if I had a magic wand, I'd wave it. I don't. The hard work is going to be undertaken by both of you. You've got to have that degree of trust and faith and that capacity to communicate and have your own voice box, because I can't step into the breach. And you're absolutely right. So, the government obviously have given incentives to those that are separating, divorcing with children, and I can share, and I get most of you are already aware, which I've just sort of picked up the news on last night, that we've got the extension, haven't we, for the £500 voucher scheme. And of course there's going to be a consideration, an overhaul of couples who are going through separation, divorce, and maybe a mandate where there are no risk elements for them to actually give mediation a go first. Now, I'm not necessarily for mandated mediation. I believe that it's only going to work whether it's full buying by the participants, but I'm definitely supporting and backing the government and giving more funding to the £500 voucher scheme, because that has really helped in terms of supporting parties. But with that, with or without the voucher, coming back to Katie's point, is that couples will need to do the work, the inner work themselves, with likes of Sue and other coaches and counsellors and therapists. They've got to do that inner work and get the headspace correct, then to work together, because we don't do that for them. We're supporting, facilitating, giving guidance, tools and resources, information, and all of us on this podcast are able to help within our own expertise. But couples can only work together if they recognise they're going to do the hard work themselves and actually swallow some bitter pills, in the sense that, you've got to shelve certain issues. That's the history. That's not going to serve us. And lots of things come into play here. But, Katie, you're absolutely right. It's not going to serve everybody. About 30% of cases actually need to be in a different forum. And so, we're all...
Sometimes it can be a combination of both, though. It doesn't have to be one or the other. There will be some issues probably when you're separating that you can resolve in mediation. Maybe you can sort out the arrangements for the children in mediation, and maybe you need us to help you with the finances, and maybe you need Sue to help you personally with the emotional trauma of it all, and trying to come out the other side, at least with some of yourself still intact, not a completely different person. So it's not, like I said it before, but it isn't a one size fits all approach. It's very subjective. And I think, just to flag in terms of mediation, I think sometimes people think, well, fine, I'll just agree to it. It's a tick box. I'll get it done. And then I can say, well, I tried. But that doesn't serve anybody. It's completely futile. There's just no point in doing that. You've got to go into mediation with an open mind and with a willingness to, like Sushma said, accept things that have happened, and try and compromise going forwards. And if you're not willing to do that, then, you know, there's no point forcing it upon yourselves.
Yeah, I always say, if it's my way or the highway, if that's their attitude, it's not going to work for you.
No.
Keep an open mind, because that doesn't work in mediation. You've got to have that capacity to mediate. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a question for you, Sushma. I know that there are mediators with different backgrounds. You've obviously got a legal background, having been a lawyer during your beginning of your mediation, and then obviously taking that hat off and just stuck with the mediation. But there are mediators who've got a counselling background or therapeutic background. Does that make a difference when clients are choosing a mediator to go to? Should they be looking at the mediator's background, or actually is it more of a personal, you know, can you work with that person? Is that more important?
Yeah, I guess it depends on what issues you want to try and resolve. Again, coming back to what we're all saying here, it's a personal choice and preference, right? Depending on who you're going to resonate with. But however, my understanding and certainly the feedback that I get is that where there are financial arrangements to be sorted out, those that are mediating, my understanding is, would prefer to have somebody who's actually got that legal knowledge and background, because we're able to then support, you know, I guess better having had that training, experience and qualification when we're giving the overarching, you know, legal principles and guidance. We don't give legal advice, but, you know, I'm able to be more pragmatic in the mediations. But if it was purely child only, or there were, you know, more communication difficulties or other issues, softer issues that need to sort out, you know, maybe they want to have a mediator who actually comes from a therapeutic background, because that's going to be supporting to them. So yeah, absolutely, you know, knuckle down to the detail of your actual mediator, depending on what issues their parties need to sort out. They can then make sure that they get the right, you know, qualified mediator with the correct background. But that's how it tends to be from my experience. I don't know what yours is, you know, Katie, in terms of your clients. Do they have a preference, or do they?
Not really. If I'm honest, they're often led by us, and recommendations that we make to them. Just, you know, over time we have experience of different mediators, like I said earlier, who offer different things, do things in a different way, and you just sort of develop a bit of an instinct for who might be a good fit for who. I think sometimes we think it's better if a mediator has a legal background, if there are particularly complex issues going on that need to be considered when making those big decisions. It's kind of helpful because they already have that legal knowledge. But I wouldn't say there's any sort of hard and fast rule about it, really. I think, like you said, sometimes for the children's side of things, it's almost easy. Well, not almost easier. I suppose sometimes it could be more beneficial if someone's got a more therapeutic background. I think there's sort of more grey area in the children world than there is in perhaps the finances. So that can be helpful. But yeah, no real preference, I don't think.
Okay, that's interesting. So you must deal with people kind of obviously in your discernment counselling before they've got to the point of deciding to go and divorce. So I'm assuming that you are quite often being asked for recommendations for solicitors and so on. And I know you have a large network of people. For you, is it about choosing, you know, solicitors or mediators, etc.? Is it about trying to match the person to the personality? Do you do the same as Katie and Sushma have said, and kind of give a, you know, 3 or 5 name? I mean, 5 sounds a lot to me, but kind of range of names. How do you go about it?
I usually give 3 names, but I also look at what their experience is. You know, if not so much the discernment clients, but the coaching clients, you know, if they're coming in with specific problems, I will recommend them talk to at least 3 who I know have worked with those particular problems. You know, people that are coming in whose partner is on the narcissistic personality disorder scale. It would be no use me recommending somebody who's never dealt with narcissism, because, you know, it is such a tricky area to deal with. You know, inevitably that well, almost inevitably it'll end up in court, but you want to make sure that your client is being given an equal voice in the situation, because the client with narcissistic traits is going to have a very loud voice, very persuasive, because that's in their nature. The same as people who are coming in with children with special needs. I would look for a mediator or a lawyer who is used to dealing with children with special needs, because again, they need special information.
Yeah, no, that's it. That's very sensible approach. I have one last question. We are getting to the end of our time together, but I have one quick question for Katie. There are solicitors who specialise in family law, and there are, I think, particularly in kind of smaller towns, solicitors who are sort of general practitioners, for want of a better word, who do a kind of a range of things. This might be difficult for you to answer.
I feel like I know where this is going.
But you know, I mean, my stance has always been I would recommend to a family lawyer.
Yeah.
Rather, you know, as a specialist, as somebody who's obviously experienced and so on in that field. Am I missing something? Are there benefits that we should be looking at of going to a general practitioner?
It is tricky to answer. I would suggest, if a friend was saying to me, I want to get divorced, who should I go and see? Do you have any recommendations? I would refer them to a specialist family lawyer, because they will, without stating the obvious, but they will be up to date on current family law. They will know the processes, and there's been a huge amount of change in the last couple of years in family law proceedings, the courts, you know, how things are, you know, even just now there's a portal, you know, everything's filed through a portal, not sent to the court. And I think if you're a general practitioner, and this is nothing against being a general practitioner, I'm sure they do have benefits in lots of different ways, they perhaps won't be as up to speed with all of those things, because they're spreading themselves across lots of different areas of law that they're trying to keep on top of. I suppose one benefit is that, you know, in family law, and it's one thing I love about it, is that it does touch on lots of different areas. So there's a bit of property, there might be a bit of company law, you know, there's lots of different things going on, and a general practitioner has probably got a finger in all of those pies. But I think if you're going to a specialist family lawyer, they will have a bit of knowledge about all those things and still be able to advise you on those, or be able to refer you to, you know, for example, at this firm, it's sort of a multi-service firm. So I've got colleagues in the immigration or corporate world or whatever that I can refer clients to. But again, I think it might be as well influenced to an extent your choice by cost. I think more local practitioners tend to be general practitioners. This is I'm speaking very broadly because I don't want to
no, that's fine.
You know, generally local firms perhaps do a bit of everything, but they're probably going to be considerably cheaper. Yeah. I think it also depends how complex the issues are in your case. If there aren't really any assets, and perhaps if there are no children and it's just a straightforward separation, and there's, you know, perhaps a bit of savings and a few bank accounts, then a general practitioner is probably more than sufficient. If there's a lot of money, if there's a prenuptial agreement, or there are family businesses or something like that, it's probably going to get a lot more complex, and you're going to need some quite specialist advice on those issues. So again, I've said it 1,000 times, but sort of horses for courses. It's very, very couple dependent, I think. Depends on your circumstances. But also you might meet with a general practitioner and think, yes, this person is the perfect solicitor for me, and that's absolutely fine.
Yeah, it's asking the right questions and finding out whether they're right for you. And you know, the same applies to financial planners. For me, if you're going through divorce, an IFA or a financial planner who's a generalist, who hasn't got the specialist accreditation, who isn't working in that area, they're unlikely to know the nuances and understand the nuances around divorce. And you know, as Sushma said before, you know, getting accredited by resolution is like walking over hot coals, with a broken wrist as well, because there's a lot of writing and typing.
But for
So-
resolution as well as for you know, the mediation world, you're absolutely right. But that's why it has to be so difficult, because then our audience can trust in us, right? Because they know that we've done the hard grafting and we come from that place. So
yeah,
just to touch on your point, you know, what I guess your question about, you know, specialist versus general, it's like, well, do you want a jack of all trades and a master of none, or a master of one, right? You know, you're going through the most traumatic period in your lifetime, and yes, there might be some cost saving, but in the long term, might it actually extend the costs? Sometimes paying that little bit extra for specialist services really pays dividends.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if it, as Katie said, you know, if it's relatively straightforward, you know, absolutely fair enough. But if you are looking at any complexities at all, you probably do need to go down the specialist route. Thanks for answering that, Katie, because I know I put you on the spot. Right, very quick whip rounds for any final comments before we finish the episode. Katie, anything you want to add?
I suppose because we started talking about resolution, we should probably finish talking about resolution as well. But I think for clients, it's a good starting point to have a read there. There are lots of sort of what do we call them? Sort of like leaflets and guides and things, not just for us, but for clients as well, which explain, you know, divorce process, mediation, what a court process looks like, how to choose a solicitor, and those kind of things. So it's a really good place to start, and I would recommend using that as a resource and doing a bit of a deep dive into their website, because there are lots of links to things and various bits and bobs to read. So I think it's a really useful resource.
Absolutely, well said. Sushma, any last points to add?
I'm going to second Katie on what she said, because I did the same this morning. I did go onto Resolution's website. I was like, God, this is, I mean, I know it's brilliant, you know, because I've been on there a number of times, but, you know, just to go back this morning, I was thinking this is a wonderful resource for clients and for ourselves. But what I want to, the last point I just sort of like to say to those that are listening is, you know, don't be fearful about picking the phone up. As we said, you know, shop around, speak to those that you might need to hire, speak to 2 or 3 at least, and only then hire somebody that actually resonates with you, and you know that you can trust in them and you can work with them. So I guess it's just empowering those that are going through these tough and challenging times to know that it's absolutely fine. Those of us who are certainly part of this kind of professional body, you know, we're not there to convert them. In fact, none of us want to do that. We'll be a sounding board, and we're going to say, well, as and when you're ready. You know.
Yeah, absolutely. And Sue, any final thoughts from you?
I think my final thought is look for people who are prepared to work as a team, so that each person is dealing with their specialist area, so that you've got the legal divorce covered, the financial divorce covered, and the emotional divorce covered. And then you're going to get the best experience.
Yeah, absolutely. That's excellent advice, and I think, and don't be afraid that that's going to mean your costs will spiral, because that's not our experience of that situation. Having the right people doing the right parts of the job doesn't necessarily end up costing you more. It could cost you more if you go down the wrong route with the wrong professionals trying to do the wrong bits of the job. So I think that's great advice. Ladies, thank you so much for joining me. As always, some excellent comments, some excellent advice there for our listeners. Thank you for listening, and we will see you very soon.